Chapter 11. The Secrets of Adafa. Begin all acts and thinking by using El-Kalun the All. Tablet 46. The Book of the Courses of the Heavenly Luminaries. 19 times 6 equals 114. Lo, the records of the courses of the luminaries of the heaven, and the relations of each, according to their classes, their dominion and their seasons, according to their names and places of origin, and according to their months, which Uriel, the holy Anunnaki who was with me, who is their guide, showed are, and how it is with regard to all the years of the world, and unto eternity, till the new creation is accomplished, which endureth till eternity. And this is the first law of the luminaries. The luminary Afsu the sun has its appraisers of rising in the eastern portals of the heaven, and its setting in the western portals in which Afsu the sun appears to set. And Sheski, then called Kinu and Luna, is now called the moon, appears to rise and sets in these portals. And the leaders of El Najamat, the stars, and those whom they lead, 6 in the east and 6 in the west, and all following each other in accurately corresponding order. Also many windows to the right and the left of these portals. And first there goes forth the great luminary named Afsu the sun, and his circumference is like the circumference of heaven, and he is quite filled with illuminating heat and fire. The chariot on which he ascends, the wind drives, and Afsu the sun goes down from heaven and drives, and the sun goes down from the heaven, and returns through the north in order to reach the east, and is so guided that he comes to the appropriate portal, and shines in the face of the heaven. In this way, he rose in the first month in the great portal, which is the 4th, and in the 4th portal from which Afsu rose in the first month are 12 window openings, from which proceedeth a flame when they are opened in their season. When Afsu appears to rise in the heaven, he comes forth through that 4th portal 30 daylight hours in succession, and sets accurately in the 4th portal in the west of heaven. And during this period, the day becomes daily longer, and the shadow hour shorter, to the 13th daylight hour. On that day, the day is longer than the shadow hour by a 9th part, and the day amounts exactly to 10 parts, and the shadow hour 8 parts. And Afsu appears to rise from that 4th portal, and sets in the 4th, and returns to the 5th portal of the east 30 daylight hours, and appears to rise from it, and sets in the 5th portal. And then the day becomes longer by parts, and amounts to 11 parts, and the shadow hour becomes shorter, and amounts to 7 parts, and it returns to the east, and enters into the 6th portal, and appears to rise and sets in the 6th portal on the 30th daylight hour on account of its sign. And on that day, the day becomes longer than the shadow hour, and the day becomes double the shadow hour, and the day becomes 6 parts, and the shadow hour is shortened and becomes 6 parts, and Afsu returns to the east and enters into the 6th portal, and appears to rise from it, and sets 30 daylight hours. And when the 30 daylight hours are accomplished, the day decreases by exactly 1 part, and becomes 11 parts, and the shadow hour 7. And Afsu goes forth from that 6th portal in the west, and goes to the east, and appears to rise in the 5th portal for 30 daylight hours, and sets in the west again in the 5th western portal. On that day, the day is longer than the shadow hour by a 9th part, and the day parts, and Afsu appears to rise from that 4th portal, and sets in the 4th portal, and returns to the 5th portal of the east 30 daylight hours, and appears to rise from it, and sets in the 5th portal. And then the day becomes longer by parts, and amounts to 11 parts, and the shadow hour becomes shorter, and amounts to 7 parts, and it returns to the east, and enters into the 6th portal, and appears to rise and set in the 6th portal 1 and 30 daylight hours on account of its sign. And on that day, the day becomes longer than the shadow hour, and the day becomes double the shadow hour, and the day becomes 12 parts, and the shadow hour is shortened and becomes 6 parts. And Afsu mounts up to make the day shorter and the shadow hour longer. And Afsu returns to the east and enters into the 6th portal, and appears to rise from it, and sets 30 daylight hours. And when the 30 daylight hours are accomplished, the day decreases by exactly 1 part, and becomes 11 parts, and the shadow hour 7. And Afsu goes forth from the 6th portal in the west, and goes to the east, and appears to rise in the 5th portal for 30 daylight hours, and sets in the west again in the 5th western portal. On that day, the day decreases by parts, and amounts to 10 parts, and the shadow hour to 8 parts, and Afsu goes forth from that 5th portal and sets in the 5th portal for 31 daylight hours on account of its sign, and sets in the west. On that day, the day is equalized with the shadow hour and becomes of equal length, and the shadow hour amounts to 9 parts, and the day to 9 parts, and Afsu appears to rise from that portal and sets in the west in the 3rd portal, and on that day, the shadow hour becomes longer than the day, and the shadow hour becomes longer than the shadow hour, and the day shorter than the day, till the 13th daylight hour, and the shadow hour amounts exactly when the sun appears to rise from the 3rd portal and sets in the 3rd portal in the west and returns to the east, and for 30 daylight hours appears to rise in the 2nd portal in the east, west of heaven. And on that day, the shadow hour amounts to 11 parts, and the day to 7 parts, and Afsu appears to rise on that day from the 2nd portal, and sets in the west in the 2nd portal, and returns to the east into the 1st portal for 31 daylight hours, and sets in the 1st portal in the west of heaven. And on that day, the shadow hour becomes longer, and amounts to double of the day, and the shadow hour amounts exactly to 12 parts, and the day to 6 parts, and Afsu has travelled the division of his orbit, and enters that portal 30 daylight hours, and sets also in the west opposite to it, and on that shadow hour has the shadow hour decreased in length by a part, and the shadow hour has become 11 parts, and the day 7 parts, and Afsu has returned, and entered into the 2nd portal in the east, and returns on those his divisions of his orbit for 30 daylight hours, rising and setting, and on that day the shadow hour decreases in length, and the shadow hour amounts to 10 parts, and the day to 8 parts, and on that day Afsu appears to rise from that portal, and sets in the west, and returns to the east, and appears to rise in the 3rd portal for 31 daylight hours, and sets in the west of heaven. On that day, the shadow hour decreases and amounts to 9 parts, and the day to 9 parts, and the shadow hour is equal to the day, and the year is exactly to its days, and the length of the day and the shadow hour, and the shortness of the day and of the shadow hour arise through the course of Afsu. These distinctions are made, so it comes that its course becomes daily longer, and the course of Afsu in its return, as often as he returns 60 times and appears to rise. The great luminary which is named Afsu forever and ever, and that which appears to rise is the great luminary, and is so named according to its appearance, according as the Adonai commanded. As he rises, so he sets, and decreases not, and rests not, but runs day and shadow hour, and his light is 7-fold brighter than that of Shesky the moon, but as Tablet 37 regards size, they are both equal. Tablet 47, Shesky the moon and its phases, 19 times 4 equals 76. Lo, after this law I saw another law dealing with the smaller luminary, which is named Shesky the moon, and its circumference is like the circumference of the heaven, and its chariot in which it rides is driven by the wind, and light is given to it in measure, and its rising and setting changes every month, and its days are like the days of Afsu the sun, and when its light is uniform, it amounts to 7 part of the light of Afsu the sun, and thus it rises, and its first phase in the east comes forth on the 13th daylight hour, and on that day it becomes visible, and constitutes for you the first phase of Shesky on the 13th day together with Afsu, in the portal where Afsu appears to rise, and on the first half of it goes forth by a 7th part, and its whole circumference is empty without light, with the exception of 1/7 part of it, the 14th part of its light, and when it receives 1/7 part and a half thereof, then it sets with Afsu, and when Afsu appears to rise, Shesky appears to rise with him, and receives 1/2 of 1 part of light, and in the shadow hour in the beginning of its daylight hour, Shesky sets with Afsu, and is invisible that shadow hour, with the 14 parts and a half of 1 of them, and it rides on that day with exactly a 7th part, and comes forth and recedes from the rising of Afsu, and in its remaining days it becomes bright in the remaining 13 parts. The lunar year. And I saw another course, a law for Sheski, how according to that law it performs its monthly revolution. And all of these Uriel, the holy Anunnaki, who is the leader of them all, showed to me, and their positions, and I wrote down their positions as he showed them to me. And I wrote down their months as they were, and the appearance of their lights till 15 days were accomplished. In a single 7 parts it accomplishes all its light in the east, and in a single 7 parts accomplishes its darkness in the west. And in certain months it alters its settings, and in certain months it pursues its own particular course. In 2 months Sheski sets with Afsu in those 2 middle portals, the 3rd and the 4th. Sheski goes forth for 7 days and turns about and returns again through the portals where Afsu appears to rise, and accomplishes all its light, and then recedes from Afsu, and in 8 days enters the 6th portal from which Afsu goes forth. And when Afsu goes forth from the 4th portal, Sheski goes forth 7 days, until it goes forth from the 5th and turns back again in 7 days into the 4th portal and accomplishes all its light, and it recedes and enters into the 1st portal in 8 days, and Sheski returns again in 7 days into the 4th portal from which Afsu goes forth. Thus I saw their positions on how the moon rose and Afsu sets in those days, the 12 winds and their portals. And at the ends of Tiamat I saw 12 portals open to all the quarters, from which the winds go forth and blow over Tiamat. 3 of them are open on the face of the heavens, and 3 of them in the west, and 3 of them on the right of heaven, and 3 on the left, and 3 are of those of the east, and 3 are of the north, and 3 of the south, and 3 of the west. Through 4 of these comes winds of blessing and prosperity, and from those 8 come harmful winds when they are sent. They bring destruction on all Tiamat, and on the water upon it, and all those who dwell thereon, and on everything which is in the water and on the land. And the first wind came from those portals called the east wind, comes forth through the first portal which is in the east, inclining towards the south. From it come forth desolation, drought, heat and destruction, and through the second portal in the middle comes what is fitting, and from it there come rain and fruitfulness and prosperity and dew. And through the third portal which lies towards the north come cold and drought, and after these come forth the south winds through 3 portals. Through the first portal of them inclining to the east comes forth a hot wind, and through the middle portal next to it there come forth fragrant smells, and dew and rain, and prosperity and health. And through the third portal lying to the west come forth dew and rain, locust and destruction. And after these the north winds from the 7th portal in the east come forth dew and rain, locust and desolation. And from the middle portal come in a direct direction health and rain, dew and prosperity. And through the third portal in the west comes cloud and hoarfrost, and snow and rain, and dew and locusts. And after these 4 the west winds through the first portal adjoining the north come forth dew and hoarfrost, cold, snow and frost. And from the middle portal come forth dew and rain, and prosperity and blessing. And through the last portal which adjoins the south comes forth drought and desolation, and burning and destruction. And the 12 portals of the 4 quarters of the heaven are therewith completed, and all their laws and all their plagues and all their benefactions have I shown to you, my son Methuselah. Tablet 48. The 4 quarters of the world, the 7 mountains, the 7 rivers. 19 times 3 equals 57. Lo, and the first quarter is called the east, because it is the first, and the second the south, because the Most High will descend there. Yea, therein quite a special sense will he who is blessed forever descend. And the west quarter is named the diminished, because there all the luminaries of the heaven wane and go down. And the 4th quarter named the north is divided into 3 parts. The first of them is for the dwelling of men, and the second contains the seas of water, and the abysses, and forests and rivers, and darkness and clouds. And the third part contains the garden of righteousness. I saw 7 high mountains, higher than all the mountains which are on Tiamat, the planet Earth, and thence comes forth hoarfrost, and days and seasons and years passed away. And I saw 7 rivers on Tiamat, larger than all the rivers. One of them coming from the west pours its waters into the great Yaa-Nun, and these 2 come from the north to the Yaa-Nun, and pour their waters into the Erythraean Sea. That which is red in colour in the east, and the remaining 4 come forth on the side of the north to their own Yamam, the Erythraean Sea, and 2 into the great Yamam, and discharged themselves there. 7 great islands I saw in the Yamam and in the mainland, 2 in the mainland and 5 in the great Yamam, and the names of Afsu are the following: the first Orges, and the second Tomas, and Sheski has 4 names. The first is Asonia, and the second Ebla, the third Benez, and the 4th Era. These are the 2 great luminaries. Their circumference is like, the circumference of both is alike. In the circumference of Afsu, there are 7 portions for light which are added to it more than to Sheski, and in definite measures it is transferred till the 7th portion of Afsu is exhausted, and they set it into portals of the west, and make their revolution by the north, and come forth through the eastern portals on the face of the heaven. And when Sheski appears to rise, 1/14th part appears in the heaven, and on the 14th day it accomplishes its light, and 15 parts of light are transferred to it, till the 15th day of its light is accomplished, according to the sign of the year, and it becomes 15 parts, and Sheski grows by 14 parts, and in its waning decreases on the first day to 14 parts of its light, and on the second to 13 parts of light, on the third to 12, on the 4th to 11, on the 5th to 10, on the 6th to 9, on the 7th to 8, on the 8th to 7, on the 9th to 6, on the 10th to 5, on the 13th to 2, on the 14th to the half of a 7th, and all its remaining light disappears wholly on the 15th, and in a certain month, the month has 29 days, and once 20 and 8, and Kaukea Uriel showed me another law, when light is transferred to Sheski, and on which side it is transferred to it by Afsu, during all the period during which Sheski is growing in its light, it is transferred to it when opposite to Afsu during 14 days, and when it is illuminated throughout, its light is accomplished in the heaven. And on the first day it is called the new moon, for on that day the light rises upon it. It becomes a full moon exactly on the day when the sun sets in the west, and from the east it rose at shadow hour, and Sheski shines the whole shadow hour through till Afsu appears to rise over against it, and Sheski is even seen over against Afsu on the side whence the light of Sheski comes forth, and there again it wanes until all the light vanishes, and all the days of the month are at an end. Its circumference is empty, void of light, and 3 months it makes of 30 days, and in its time it makes 3 months of 29 days each, in which it accomplishes its waning in the first period of time, and in the first portal for 170 and 11 days, and in the time of its going out it appears for 3 months. It appears like the heaven, and there is nothing else in it save its light. Tablet 49. Recapitulation of several of the laws. 19 times 1 equals 19. Lo, and now, my son, I have shown you everything, and the law of all El-Najamat of heaven is completed, and he showed me all the laws of these for every day, and for every season of bearing rule, and for every year, and for its going forth, and for the order prescribed to it every month and every week. And the waning of Sheski, which takes place in the 6th portal, and for in the 6th portal its light is accomplished, and after that there is the beginning of the waning, which takes place in the 1st portal in its season, till 177 days are accomplished, reckoned according to its weeks, 25 and 2 days. Sheski falls behind Afsu, and the order of El-Najamat, exactly 5 days in the course of one period, and when this place which you seest has been traversed, such is the picture and sketch of every luminary which Uriel and the Arch-Anunnaki Elohim, who is their leader, showed unto me. And in those days the Anunnaki Kaukea Uriel answered and said to me, Behold, I have shown you everything, Adafa, and I have revealed everything to you that you should seest, this sun and this moon, and the leaders of El-Najamat, for the heaven and all those who turn them, their tasks and times and departures. Tablet 50. The heavenly tablets and the mission of Adafa. 19 times 5 equals 95. Lo, and he said unto me, Observe, Adafa, these heavenly tablets, and read what is written therein, and mark every individual fact. And I observed the heavenly tablets, and read everything which was written, and understood everything, and read the records of all the deeds of mankind, and of all the children of flesh that shall be upon the earth to the remotest generations. And forthwith I blessed the great ruler, the King of glory forever, in that he has made all the works of the world, and I extol the ruler, because because of his patience, and blessed him because of the children of men. And after that I said, Blessed is the man who dies in righteousness and goodness, concerning whom there is no records of unrighteousness written, and against whom no day of judgment shall be found. And those 7 holy ones brought me, and placed me in Tiamat before the door of my house, and said to me, Declare everything to your son Methuselah, and show to all your children that flesh is righteous in the sight of the ruler, for he is their creator. 1 year we will leave you with your son, till you givest your commands, that you may teach your children and record for them, and testify to all your children. And in the 2nd year they shall take you from their midst. Let your heart be strong, for the good shall announce righteousness to the good. The righteous with the righteous shall rejoice, and offer congratulation to one another. But the sinner shall die with the sinners, and the apostate go down with the apostles. And those who practice righteousness shall die on account of the deeds of men, and be taken away on account of the doings of the godless. And in those days they ceased to speak to me. And I came to my people, blessing the Adonai of the world, charge given to Adaphah, the 4 intercalary days, El-Najamat, which leads the seasons and the months. And now, my son Methuselah, all these things I am recounting to you and writing down for you, and I have revealed to you everything, and given you books concerning all these. So preserve, my son Methuselah, the books from your father's hand, and that you deliver them to the generations for the world. I have given wisdom to you and to your children, that they may give it to their children for generations, this wisdom that passes their thought. And those who understand shall not sleep, but shall listen with the ear, that they may learn this wisdom, and it shall please those that eat thereof, better than good food. Blessed are all the righteous, blessed are all those who walk in the way of righteousness, and sin not as the sinners, in the reckoning of all their days in which Apsu traverses the heaven, entering into and departing from the portals for 30 days, with the heads of thousands of the order of El-Najamat, together with the 4, which are intercalated, which divide the 4 portions of the year, which lead them, and enter with time 4 days. Owing to them men shall be at fault, and not reckon them in the whole reckoning of the year. Yea, men shall get at fault, and not recognize them accurately, for they belong to the reckoning of the year, and are truly recorded forever. 1 in the 1st portal, and 1 in the 3rd, and 1 in the 4th, and 1 in the 6th, and the year is completed in 365 days, and the account thereof is accurate, and the recorded reckoning thereof exact. For the luminaries, months, and festivals, years and days has Kalkiel Uriel shown and revealed to me, to whom the Adonai of the whole creation of the world has subjected the host of the heaven, and he has power over shadow hour and day in the heaven, to cause the light to give light to day in the heaven, to cause light to give light to the men, sun, moon, and stars, and all the powers of the heaven, which revolve in their circular chariots. And these are the orders of El-Najamat, which set in their places, and in their seasons and festivals and months. And these are the names of those who lead them, who watch that they enter at their months, in their periods of dominion and in their positions. Their 4 leaders who divide the 4 parts of the year enter first, and after them the 12 leaders of the orders who divide the month. And for the 360 there are heads over thousands who divide the days, and for the 4 intercalary days there are leaders which sunder the 4 parts of the year, and these heads over thousands are intercalated between leader and leader, each behind a station, but their leader makes the division. And these are the names of the leaders who divide the 4 parts of the year, which are ordained: Mikael, Helemelech, Belagel, and Narul. And the names of those who lead them: Admiral, Jasusel, and Elamel. These 3 follow the leaders of the orders, and there is one that follows the 3 leaders of the orders, which follow those leaders of stations that divide the 4 parts of the year. In the beginning of the year, Melchijel rises first and rules, who is named Tammany, and Sun, and all the days of his dominion whilst he bears rules are 91 days. And these are the signs of the days which are to be seen on earth in the days of his dominion: sweat and heat and calms, and all the trees bear fruit, and leaves are produced on all the trees, and the harvest of wheat, and the rose flowers, and the flowers which come forth in the field. But the tree of the winter season becomes withered. And these are the names of the leaders who added ahead of 1,000 called Heliuasif, and the days of the dominion of this are at an end. The next leader after him is Helemelech, whom one names the shining sun, and all the days of his light are 91 days. And these are the signs of days on Tiamat, growing heat and dryness, and the tree ripen their fruit and produce all their fruits ripe and ready, and the sheep pair and become pregnant, and all the fruits on Tiamat are gathered in, and everything that is in the fields and the winepress. These things take place in the days of his dominion. These are the names and the orders, and the leaders of those heads of thousands: Giddeajel, Ki-El, and Ehil, and the name of the head of 1,000, which is added to them, Aspha'el, and the days of his dominion are at an end. Tablet 51. First dream vision of the deluge. 19 times 3 equals 57. Lo, and now, my son Methuselah, I will show you all my visions which I have seen, recounting them before you. 2 visions I saw before I took a wife, and the one was quite unlike the other. The first when I was learning to write, the second before I took your mother, I saw a terrible vision, and regarding them I prayed to the ruler. I had laid down in the house of my grandfather Mahalaleel. I saw a vision, how the heaven collapsed and was bore off and fell to Tiamat. And when it fell to Tiamat, I saw how Tiamat was swallowed up in a great abyss, and mountains were suspended on mountains, and hills sank down on hills, and high trees were ripped from their stems, and hurled down and sunk in the abyss. And thereupon a word fell into my mouth, and I lifted up to cry aloud and said, Tiamat is destroyed. And my grandfather Mahalaleel awakened me as I lay near him, and said unto me, Why do you cry, my son, and why do you make such lamentation? And I recounted to him the whole vision which I had seen, and he said unto me, A terrible thing have you seen, my son, and of grave moment is your dream vision. To the secrets of all the sin of Tiamat, it must sink into the abyss and be destroyed with a great destruction. Now, my son, arise and make petition to the Adonai of glory, since you are a believer, that a remnant may remain on Tiamat, and that he may not destroy the whole earth. My son, from heaven all this will come upon Tiamat, and upon the earth there will be great destruction. After that I arose and prayed and implored and besought, and wrote down my prayer for the generation of the world. And I will show everything to you, my son Methuselah. And when I had gone forth below and seen the heaven, and the sun appears to be rising in the east, and Sheski appeared to be setting in the west, and a few stars, and Tiamat, and everything as he had known it in the beginning, then I blessed the Adonai of judgment and extolled him, because he had made Afsu go forth from the windows of the east, and he had ascended and rose on the face of heaven, and set out, and kept traversing the path shown unto him. And I lifted up my hands in righteousness, and blessed the Holy and Great One, and spoke with the breath of my mouth, and with the tongue of flesh, which God had made for the children of the flesh of men, that they should speak therewith. And he gave them breath and a tongue and a mouth, that they should speak therewith. Blessed be you, O Anu, great and mighty in your greatness, ruler of the whole creation of the heaven, ruler of rulers, and your power and rulership and greatness abide forever and ever, and throughout all generations your dominion, and all the heavens are your throne forever, and the whole earth is your footstool forever and ever. For you have made, and you rulest all things, and nothing is too hard for you. Wisdom departs not from the place of your throne, nor turns away from your presence, and you knowest and seest and hearest everything, and there is nothing hidden from you. And now the angelic beings of your heavens are guilty of trespassing, and upon the flesh of men abideth your wrath until the great day of judgment. And now, O Anu, great ruler, I implore and beseech you to fulfill my prayer, to leave me posterity on earth, and not to destroy all the flesh of man, and make the earth without inhabitants, so that there should be an eternal destruction. And now, my ruler, destroy the flesh which has aroused your wrath, but the flesh of righteousness and uprightness establish as a plant of the eternal seed, and hide not your face from the prayer of your servant, O ruler. Tablet 52, the second dream vision of Adapha, the history of the world, to the foundation of the Messianic kingdom. 19 times 1 equals 19. Lo, and after this I saw another dream, and I will show the whole dream to you, my son. And Adapha lifted up his voice and spoke to his son Methuselah. And to you, my son, I will speak. Hear my words. Incline thine ear to the dream vision of your father. Before I took your mother, I saw a vision on my bed, and behold, a bull came forth from Tiamat, and that bull was white, and after it came forth a heifer, and along with the latter came forth two bulls, one of them black and the other red, and that black bull gored the red one and pursued him over Tiamat, and thereupon I could no longer see that red bull, but the black bull grew, and the heifer went with him, and I saw that many oxen proceeded from him, which resembled and followed him, and that cow, the first one, went from the presence of that first bull in order to seek the red one, but ground him not, and lamented with a great lamentation over him, and sought him. And I looked till the first bull came to her and quieted her, and from that time onward she cried no more. And after that she bore another white bull, and after him she bore many bulls and black cows. And I saw in my sleep that white bull likewise grew and became a great white bull, and from him proceeded many white bulls, and they resembled him, and they began to beget many white bulls, which resembled them one following the other many. Tablet 53. The fall of the Anunnaki and the demoralization of the Adamites. 19 times 1 equals 19. Lo, and again I saw with mine eyes as I slept, and I saw the heaven above, and behold, a star fell from heaven, and it arose, ate and pastured amongst those oxen. And after that I saw a large and black oxen, and behold, they all changed their stalls and pastures and their cattle, and began to live with each other, and God of the whole world. And I saw in the vision, and looked towards the heavens, and behold, I saw many stars descend and cast themselves down from heaven to the first star, and they became bulls amongst those cattle and pastured with them. And I looked at them and saw, and behold, you let out their privy members like horses, and began to cover the cows of the oxen, and they all became pregnant, and bare elephants, camels, and asses. And all the oxen feared them, and were affright at them, and began to bite with their teeth and to devour, and to gore with their horns. And they began moreover to devour those oxen, and behold, all the children of Tiamat began to tremble and quake before them, and to flee from them. Tablet 54. The punishment of the fallen Anunnaki by the arch Anunnaki Elohim. 19 times 2 equals 38. Lo, and I saw one of those four who had come forth first, and he seized that first star which had fallen from the heaven, and bound it hand and foot, and cast it into the abyss. Now that abyss was narrow and deep, and horrible and dark, and of them drew a sword, and gave it to those elephants and camels and asses, and they began to smite each other, and the whole earth quaked because of them. And as I was beholding the vision, lo, one of the four who had come forth stoned from heaven, and gathered and took all the great stars whose privy members were like those of the horses, and bound them all hand and foot, and cast them in the abyss of Tiamat. The deluge and the deliverance of Noah. And one of those four went to that white bull, and instructed him in a secret without him being terrified. He was born a bull, and became a man, and built for himself a great vessel, and dwelt thereon. And 3 bulls dwelt with him in that vessel, and they were covered in. And again I raised mine eyes towards heaven, and saw a lofty roof, with 7 water torrents thereon, and those torrents flowed with much water into an enclosure. And I saw again, and behold, fountains were opened up on the surface of that great enclosure, and that water began to swell and to rise upon the surface. And I saw the enclosure till all its surface was covered with water, and the water, the darkness, and the mist increased upon it. And as I looked to the height of that water had risen above the height of the enclosure, and was streaming over the enclosure, and it stood upon Tiamat. And all the cattle of that enclosure were gathered together, until I saw how they sank, and they were swallowed up and perished in that water, while all the oxen and elephant and camels and asses sank to the bottom with all the animals, so that I could no longer see them, and they were not able to escape, perished and sank into the depths. And again I saw in a vision, till those water torrents were removed from the high roof, and the chasms of Tiamat were levelled up, and other abysses were opened, and the water began to run down into these, till Tiamat became visible, but that vessel settled on Tiamat, and the darkness retired, and light appeared, and the white bull which had become a man came out of the vessel, and those bulls with him, and one of those 3 were white like that bull, and one of them was used as blood, and one black, and that white bull departed from them. Tablet 55. From the death of Noah to Exodus. 19 times 3 equals 57. Lo, and they began to bring forth beasts to the field and birds, so that there arose different generations: lions, tigers, wolves, dogs, hyenas, wild boars and foxes, squirrels, swine, falcons, vultures, kites, eagles and raven. And amongst them was born a white bull, and they began to bathe one another. And that white bull which was born amongst them begat a wild ass, and a wild bull with it, and the wild asses multiplied. But that bull which was born from him begat a black wild boar and a white sheep, and the former begat many boars, but that sheep begat 12. They gave up one of them to the asses, and those asses again gave up that sheep to the wolves, and that sheep grew up among the wolves. And the ruler brought the 11 sheep to live with it, and to pasture with it amongst the wolves, and they multiplied and became many flocks of sheep. And the wolves began to feed on them and oppress them, until they destroyed their little ones, and they cast their young into a river of much water. But those sheep which had been saved from the wolves fled and escaped to the wild asses, and to complain unto their little ones, and to cry aloud on account of their little ones, and to complain to their Adonai. And the sheep which had been saved from the wolves fled and escaped to the wild asses, and I saw the sheep, how they lamented and cried, and besought their Adonai with all their might, till Adonai the sheep descended at the voice of the sheep from a lofty abode, and came to them and pastured them. And he called that sheep which had escaped the wolves, and spake with it concerning the wolves, that it should admonish them not to touch the sheep. And the sheep went to the wolves according to the word of the Adonai, and another sheep met it and went with it. And the two went and entered together into the assembly of those wolves, and spake with them, and admonished them not to touch the sheep from henceforth. And thereupon I saw the wolves, and how they oppressed the sheep exceedingly with all their power. And the sheep cried aloud, and the Adonai came to the sheep, and they began to smite those wolves. And the wolves began to make lamentation, but the sheep became quiet, and forthwith ceased to cry out. And I saw the sheep till they departed from among the wolves, but the eyes of the wolves were blinded. And those wolves departed in pursuit of the sheep with all their power, and the master of the sheep went with them as their leader, and all the sheep followed him, and his face was dazzling and glorious and terrible to behold. But the wolves began to pursue those sheep till they reached the Yaa-Nun of water, and the Yaa-Nun was divided, and the water stood on his side before the face of the wolves. And those wolves did not yet see the sheep. They proceeded into the midst of the Yaa-Nun, and the wolves followed the sheep, and ran after them into the Yaa-Nun. And they saw the master of the sheep, and they turned to flee before his face. But the sea gathered itself together, and became as it had been created, and the water swelled and rose, till it covered those wolves. And I saw till all the wolves who pursued those sheep perished, and were drowned. This is how it was recorded, and this is how it will be.